With the campaigning for the upcoming referendums in full swing, there really has been a lot to talk about. I, for one, am still waiting for an answer as to why Catherine Martin has not yet deleted her misleading tweet, but, well, I think she may have even bigger problems on her hands, so I won't hold my breath. But it is her tweet and others like it that have prompted this video. Now, I've already covered why I'll be voting no in both upcoming referendums, but the care referendum and the discourse around it has thrown up a lot of talking points that are worthy of a closer look. So what are these talking points I'm referring to? Well, the whole lie about how our constitution apparently says a woman's place is in the home for a start, and everything that follows that line of thinking. Now, if you follow this channel, then you'll know that the constitution does not, in fact, say that a woman's place is in the home. It does say that the state recognises by her life within the home, woman gives to the state a support without which the common good cannot be achieved. And it goes on to say that the state shall therefore endeavour to ensure that mothers shall not be obliged by economic necessity to engage in labour to the neglect of their duties in the home. To me, the Constitution recognises and appreciates what women, and in particular mothers, do, which is fairly unique as far as constitutions go, and offers protections to mothers that unfortunately have never been acted on by successive governments, nor have those protections been chased up in the courts. Until now, that is, there is a current case before the Supreme Court, which just beggars belief as to why the referendums were not put on hold until after the verdict. But all this talk of women's and mothers' roles got me thinking, why are some people so offended by the idea that we all have roles and duties in our homes and in society? What is it about generalising roles that can cause offence? And in particular, what is it about generalising a woman or mother's role that is so offensive to some? So okay, I do understand why hearing that a woman's place is in the home would offend people. It harkens back to a time when a woman had no choice in the matter, or in other matters for that matter, and we certainly don't want to go backwards. But again, our constitution doesn't say that, so all good. But why are some people so offended by the idea or suggestion that women are more inclined to caring roles? Is it not something us women should be proud of? That we care? And women do care. Let's look at some stats. 98% of full-time carers in Ireland are women, and most experience economic hardship. That's not hard to understand why carers have been chronically undervalued and ignored in this country since, well, forever. Women also do twice as much unpaid care and housework as men. Now, the National Women's Council of Ireland will tell you that this needs to change, and I'd agree this does need to change. However, what I think needs to change is different from what the NWCI think needs to change. See, for me, what needs to change is the level of support afforded to these women so that they do not experience economic hardship in the first place. You know, support these carers, these women, raise them up and appreciate them and look after them. But what the NWCI want is more men to be in these roles, which to me just sounds like they'd rather drag men down into economic hardship for the sake of equality and gender inclusion rather than raise women up with economic and social supports. When it comes to stay-at-home parents, the figures are also heavily weighted in favour of women. If I've done my maths right, it's roughly 90% of stay-at-home parents that are mothers, as per Census 2022. Is this the caveman philosophy or the patriarchy at play? Is it that employment is unkind to mothers? Or, when taken with the statistic that around 2/3 of working mothers would prefer to be stay-at-home mothers, does it mostly just boil down to maternal instincts and the matriarchy at play? For me, yes, employment is not set up to adequately support mothers, but we can't ignore the fact that a lot of mothers would just rather be at home raising their children. So is that the patriarchy? Have we been conditioned to accept that a mother's role in society is to be in the home looking after the children simply and only because men like it that way? Or is it actually the silent matriarchy at play and maternal instincts are real, that women are just more inclined to caring roles? And as a quick aside here, I am not for 1 second saying that men don't care. Of course they do. I see every day how my husband cares for our child and our family, just like all the dedicated dads out there do. And if there are men out there who want to take on the primary caregiving role as a stay-at-home dad or as a carer, then they should absolutely be fully supported. But I'm talking today about the type of caring that is traditionally associated with women and exploring why. So does it go against the doctrines of the feminist movement to recognise and want to support that women are different to men and that we should be supporting and valuing the maternal side of our human nature? I would class myself as a feminist, really. What woman wouldn't? But what is feminism anymore? There are so many waves and subsets of feminism that I have no idea where I fit in. For me, feminism means equality between the two sexes, equality of opportunity and of expression. But I'm also not blind to the differences between men and women either, and I realise that there are some areas where men and women will never be equal, simply by virtue of men and women being different in the first place. So is that why I don't fit in with the other feminists who tried to tell me that the language in Article 41.2 is sexist? Because I can't see a problem with recognising the work women and mothers do in the home and how vital they both are to society, and because I see that women are more inclined towards caring roles. But the unpaid caring figures and unpaid stay-at-home parent figures only tell a part of this story, and on their own they can and will be pushed aside as merely sexist caveman thinking that it should be women who take on these roles, and so therefore it is. But what about paid work? What if I told you that if we look at the gender breakdown of employment across various industries, we will also see a pattern whereby women care? Let's take a look at some more stats, shall we? Let's look at healthcare. Care. It's right there in the name, healthcare. Would it surprise you to find out that the majority of healthcare workers are women? The EU average is 78%. 78% of all healthcare carried out in the EU is performed by women. This includes doctors, nurses, midwives, personal care workers, and other health professionals and their assistants. 78% are women. Here at home in Ireland, it's 79%. 79% of what keeps our lumbering behemoth, the HSE, ticking over are women. Highly educated, hard-working women. Caring women. Why are so many women drawn to healthcare? It wouldn't have anything to do with our maternal and caring instincts, would it? The highest representation for women in healthcare is in the nursing and midwifery category, 90%. That wouldn't be to do with the more hands-on, patient-led, caring nature of those roles, would it? Because women care. Is it really that simple? Let's look at another sector, shall we? How about teaching? Moulding young minds, mentoring and guiding them, supporting their development. Sounds a lot like parenting, doesn't it? Which is why in Ireland we have the legal principle in our schools of in loco parentis, that is, in place of the parent. So what percentage of teachers are women here in Ireland? 74%. In case you were wondering, the EU average is 72%. In Irish primary schools that figure rises to 85%, and in secondary schools it drops a little bit to 70%. That's quite a high percentage overall, isn't it? In fact, just over 1 in 3 Irish women at work were either in the education or healthcare sector in 2018. If we look at childcare, again, it's predominantly women, isn't it? If we look at the Eurostat data, we can see that 93% of childcare workers and teachers' aides in the EU are women. When it comes to early childhood education and care, women make up a whopping 99% of the workforce here in Ireland, with the EU average at 97%. I can't find figures for SNAs, but I'd be confident to wager that they are also predominantly women. What about the non-profit sector? According to the Wheel's National Guide to Pay and Benefits in Community, Voluntary and Charitable Organisations, women represented 75% of the workforce. So what can we glean from all of these stats? Is it too obvious for me to say that perhaps, maybe, just maybe, women are drawn to roles where they can provide care in one way, shape or form? These are paid roles after all, and yet it is predominantly women. As I said earlier, just over 1 in 3 Irish women at work were either in the education or health sector. So why is that? Well, let's talk about pay. We all know that childcare work and early years education work is not very well paid. In fact, creches and early years providers are struggling to retain staff all across Europe. So far more needs to be done to support these vital services. Is the poor levels of pay the reason for such a small amount of men in this sector? Or is there something else at play? Perhaps the work-life balance is what attracts women, especially mothers, to these roles. They may not be paid well, but at least they can operate around somewhat family-friendly hours. Perhaps that's all it is. But maybe, just maybe, women are attracted to childcare, early years education and childminding for other reasons. Maybe they just like taking care of kids. Charitable and voluntary work, well, it's right there in the name, isn't it? Not much in the way of pay to attract more volunteers, and yet again, it's predominantly women who take up the mantle of charitable work. Are women just suckers who are doing what is ultimately the failure of government? Or could it be that women are just more inclined to caring and want to help others? Healthcare is quite diverse in terms of pay, but most, like nursing, are undervalued. So again, what is it that attracts women to these roles? Of course, at the top, the pay is a factor, but what about the roles that women dominate, like nursing and midwifery, for example, that are not as well paid? Again, could it simply be that women are inclined to these roles because they care? I mean, it certainly isn't for the working hours and conditions now, is it? But what about teaching? Being a teacher has traditionally been quite a well-paid job. When teachers go on strike or ask for better pay, you will invariably see the arguments that teaching is an easy job, with great perks and benefits such as great working hours and great holidays. And while lately teaching jobs don't command the same pay as they used to, the gender gap has always been there. Why, if it has traditionally been such a desirable job with great pay, hours and benefits, have we not seen more men in this role? Could it possibly be that teaching, especially teaching young children, is more in line with how women care? That women are more likely to want to take up the in loco parentis mantle? Now, perhaps I'm reading into these statistics more than I should. Perhaps I am seeing patterns that are not there. But what if those patterns are there? And what if those statistics do back up the idea that women are generally more inclined to caring roles, occupations, and vocations? And if that is true, then why are the likes of the National Women's Council of Ireland not fighting for better supports and pay for these women instead of trying to fight the tide by banging on about gender balance? Do I have a problem with men taking up these roles? Of course not. Just like I have zero issues with women who want to get involved in, say for example, the construction industry. But let's not pretend that the only barrier to more women in construction and more men in care roles is some sort of shady agenda of the patriarchy to oppress women and keep them down. It's far more to do with human nature than it seems we'd like to admit. So instead of banging on about the evil patriarchy, can we instead, for once, try to empower and raise up the matriarchy? Instead of taking offence at the idea that women actually seem to like caring, how about we support those mothers who wish to remain in their homes to raise their children themselves? How about instead of trying to force a gender balance in care because of perceived sexism, we try to change the very system that undervalues and ignores the invaluable contribution of carers of all types and start placing real value on these roles? How about we start actually supporting women and the matriarchs in our society? We often hear about the gender pay gap, but we never really think about why it really exists in the first place. We just hear that it's sexism. A sexism that implies that women are purposely paid less than men simply by virtue of them being women, when the real sexism at play is how the working world is set up in the first place. The working world is set up in a way that flies in the face of families and the commitments and duties that having a family brings. If you are in the workforce, you need to be all in to be useful to your employer. You need to be flexible. You need to be fully committed. If you are not, then you pay the price for that in terms of poorer wages. Working mothers often take this hit as they want to be more available to their family's needs. In general, it is working mothers who need more flexibility from their employers, and that comes with a cost to not only their earnings, but their career prospects too. This is made all the worse by virtue of the fact that in order to even think about ever owning your own home, you need to be a two-income family. So perhaps in order to address the gender pay gap, we first have to address and attain a far better work-life balance, whereby families don't have to sell their souls just to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. So taking all of this into account, I have to ask, why are we so concerned with gender balance when achieving a gender balance in caring roles merely changes the gender of who is undervalued and unsupported? A gender balance doesn't bring with it better pay or supports. Why are we not more concerned with actually adequately valuing what carers and by extension women do? Perhaps a more natural gender balance could be achieved in those industries and sectors of society if we instead place our focus on taking the economic hardship out of caring and on supporting those carers and parents and their choices to put their families first. What if we re-evaluated what is important to our society and set up our society and economy around those values? Well, we may never know, as time and again carers and stay-at-home parents are ignored. This upcoming referendum will do nothing to help these two groups. It will do nothing to usher in a gender balance, and it will do nothing to alleviate the economic hardship experienced by carers. But one thing I do know is that I am not ashamed of being a stay-at-home mother. I am not ashamed of choosing my child over a career. I am not ashamed of being a stereotypical Irish mammy. I am not ashamed of caring, and neither should any other woman. So what do you think? Have I missed the point entirely, and have I been unconsciously captured by the patriarchy? Or should we maybe start acknowledging that men and women are actually different and try to build a society that recognises and supports those differences, instead of wasting our time with a wasteful referendum where nothing fundamental will change for the better? In fact, it may well make things worse. Should we not use that effort, those funds and resources, to actually help and support those who take on caring roles in our society, instead of merely paying lip service to them while valiantly fighting against a perceived sexism that most cannot even see in the first place? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of new content. If you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee or a super thanks, which is greatly appreciated, and a huge thank you to those of you that already have. You can also follow me on Twitter. Until next time, slán go fóill.